Alrighty, and we're on. So I'm here with Zach Stanley, even though on Instagram it's Zach Stanley.
Yeah.
So we'll just literally, before we push the start button on this, so Zach's got his own YouTube channel as well, and we're talking about he had a lot of success very early on. Like the first video that you produced when you did a video on the calf kick went to like 250,000 views, and you were like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah, YouTube's easy. Like anybody can do this.
Yeah.
And so then the second video, also did was it the Sean O'Malley one? Or?
Yeah, like 250K or something.
Yep. And then the third one was what? Something else?
Calvin Cater.
Calvin Cater, and that got 100 something.
Yeah.
Yep. And then after that, you were like, and then it sort of dropped off after that.
Yeah. Just started dropping down.
Yep. And I guess, speaking to that, right, like when you have wins so early on, like, how did your mindset sort of change around, okay, this is easy, then to, oh, what have I done wrong?
Yeah, definitely. At first I was thinking like, oh, it's just because of me. Like I had a great idea here. Like, oh, it's easy. Anyone can make a YouTube channel and succeed. And then quickly I realized it's a lot more to do with the algorithm. What's popular that week? What are people talking about? And who are people searching about? So the calf kick at the time was coming up in MMA and people were talking about it a lot. But when I would search on YouTube, there was no real definitive video explaining like why it was working in MMA and why it doesn't work in other sports, or why it's not really sought after in something like Muay Thai. So I got a quick humbling experience pretty quickly from that.
Yeah. All right. So let's sort of wind it all back for people. So we're sitting here at one of the VT1 offices up in Chatswood. So VT1's a mixed martial arts academy. They do all sorts of different programs for kids, teens, adults, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, mixed martial arts, you name it, they've probably got it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And so you're one of the coaches here?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. And also, full-time worker here.
Yep. Do some admin and help out a little bit.
Yep. Okay. So to give people a bit of an idea about you, let's wind it all the way back.
Sure.
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Brisbane.
Yep.
In a little town called Wynnum. So if you don't know it, if people don't know about it, it's not the roughest area in Brisbane, but it's not the North Shore either. Yeah. So it's a little bit rough.
Yep.
So I was a smaller kid in a school full of like New Zealanders and Maoris.
Yep.
And so I had to learn how to fight pretty quickly. Yeah. And I was ADHD kid as well, so I had a mouth on me.
Yep.
And that probably led to a lot of attention on me that I brought upon myself.
Yeah.
So from there, I got into karate quite young because I wasn't super athletic. I couldn't compete with these guys on the footy team. I could play at lunch, but I was never making the team. Like this little kid, little skinny white boy.
Yep.
So I ended up in karate, and that kind of spurred my martial arts journey.
Yep. So, okay, let's, there's a few things there that I want to sort of touch upon. With the ADHD, like, was that something that your parents got you diagnosed with, or a teacher diagnosed you with?
Yeah, I think the teachers spoke to my mom, and then my mom got me diagnosed with it like fairly early on, maybe like grade 3 or something.
And then did that mean that they wanted to give you medication?
Yeah, they did.
Yep. So were you on a Ritalin, kid?
Yeah, I was on Ritalin from like grade 3 to like grade 7.
Yeah. And I guess, when you reflect back on that, like, was there a stark change in terms of your behavior from grade 3 to grade 7 as a result of it?
I think there was. I think at the time I probably couldn't see it.
Yep.
Because with ADHD comes some oppositional defiance disorder as well. And I think most kids don't want to do what their parents want them to do. So I was pretty rejective of taking medication and had to be kind of like made to take it constantly, like try not to take it, try to skip my dose.
Yep.
But looking back with hindsight, I definitely think, it was a good thing.
Okay. And then, and we're sort of digressing a little bit here, but I guess when you got to year 7, like what was the catalyst that said that, oh, you don't need to take this medication anymore? Yeah,
so that was a personal choice. And my mum had always been like, look, once you're a bit older, a teenager, and you can make your own decision, you can choose what you want to do. And going into high school, I wanted like a fresh start.
Yep.
Like it's not like I was super bullied for ADHD, but it was still like self-conscious to have to go and take a tablet 2 times a day with the nurse. And going into high school, I wanted to be more active and more athletic. And if you don't know about Ritalin, it kind of gives you a bit of a zombie mode. So I wouldn't play sport during school because I was always so tired. As well, like I said, I was small and not eating that well.
Yep.
So going into high school, I wanted just like a fresh start. You
Yeah.
know, like, let me have a crack at doing this just myself.
Yep.
So I was off medication from then, like grade 7, and I recently went back on it at 30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I know we've jumped all the way to 30, but I sort of want to, you know, finish the thought train on this because I'm very interested in it. And the reason why I'm interested in it is because I was probably like you know, I was a smaller Asian kid. Not, you're obviously not Asian, but
Yeah,
but I was a
smaller.
small Asian kid. And my teachers also, you know, told my mum, oh, are you feeding this guy red cordial, or why is he so full of energy?
Yeah.
He's, you know, I was very difficult to manage in the classroom, and obviously one of the suggestions was probably to throw me on medication. But my mum, being a typical Asian mum, was like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with my boy," you know, and so no medication, and you know, I got through life, and I'm okay. And
Yeah.
you know, I think I'm very much like you. I got into karate as a kid. You know, from the age of 5, my mum put me into karate because I was a bit of a crybaby. And it was a crybaby just because I learnt how to manipulate people, that, you know, I could turn the waterworks on
Yeah.
and you can get out of things. And so my mum thought I was a wuss. And so then she was like, oh, we need to go send you to do some things to toughen you up.
Yeah.
And that's why I ended up studying karate. But to go back to your journey in terms of the Ritalin thing. So at 30, what made you make that choice to then decide to go back onto the medication?
Yeah. So I'd come out of the Defence Force because I was in the Defence Force prior. And it's so structured in there. You know, like they just tell you what to do all the time. And then when I got out, I really noticed the impacts on me. You know, like I was thinking like, oh, I'll study. I'll come out and I'll study. And I just was having so much trouble to study. I was starting to, you know, miss payments that are important, like because I would just forget about them. And all these things just started to rack up. And I was like, hey, maybe I should look back into that ADHD thing that I was medicated for a long time.
Yeah.
And so I went and spoke to the doctors and I said, look, as an adult, I'm noticing these things that as a kid, like, you miss your homework, whatever, like, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Miss your car payment, much bigger deal. You know, like, oh, I've been pulled over, you're not registered. Like, oh man, I didn't even know. Like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fly with the police.
No.
So I was like, I can't keep having these little incidents, you know, because my ego's too big to go and get on the medication I'm supposed to be on. And medication's a personal thing. Like, if you don't want to take it, that's fine. If you do, that's fine.
Yeah.
But for me, I was noticing enough symptoms that I was like, okay, like, I don't need to do this myself and struggle. Like, let's see what medication has to offer. Yeah.
And so, you know, since being back on the medication, you found that it's helped with a lot of those things?
A lot, yeah. A lot more stability in life. I used to have this constant feeling of like, what's next? What am I doing? Like, and always searching for something new. Like, you know, oh, maybe I should learn to code. Maybe I should learn graphic design. Maybe I should learn rock climbing. Maybe I should learn surfing. Or maybe I should just focus on the job that I have and the role that I have.
Yeah.
So that's something it's made me just kind of tunnel vision in and just focus on what I'm doing a lot more.
Yeah, I sort of resonate with that. Like, I think, you know, my wife will often tell me that I try and do too many things. And then it's like, you know, I always feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, as an example, you know, before COVID happened, I was, you know, getting really into archery, you know, and so I had some mates that I would go to the archery range with and we'd shoot arrows before work and all this sort of stuff. And she was like, you know, here you are adding another hobby, right? What are you doing? And it's like, it's a pretty good question, you know, like, what am I doing? And I guess, you know, I wanted to go hunting and do some other things. And then it was like, oh, you know, but I don't really have the time. Yeah. And it's like, you know, in life, when you only have 24 hours of the day, you're either going to sacrifice sleep or you're going to sacrifice something else. Yeah. Right. And when I was young, I would sacrifice sleep. You know, like I think you'd probably have been pretty much the same. You'd probably like go to bed at midnight and wake up at 5, 6 a.m.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Right. And so we could do that when we're in our late teens, 20s, and like, you know, go through this grind of just, you know, operating on minimal sleep. Yeah. But then you get to this point in life, and I think that probably happened for me maybe, when I got into my 30s, where I was like, I can't function on 5, 6 hours of sleep anymore. Yeah. You know, I actually need to get some adequate rest. And I could actually see how it was impacting my mood. You know, like I'd wake up the next day and just feel like you hate the world. And then it was like, okay, so if I want to have a good day the next day, the thing that I need to do tonight is actually prioritize my rest so that when I go to bed, I go to bed at a reasonable hour, I get enough sleep, I wake up the next day and I know that I'm not starting on the back foot because I decided that I was going to burn the midnight oil for whatever reason. Yeah. And half the time, you know, it's probably doing stupid shit like playing games.
Yeah. I'm going to become a coder at midnight on a Thursday with no experience. And now it's 4 a.m. and I'm like reading Python manuals, knowing I'm never going to use it. Like, man, go to bed. Like, you have a job tomorrow. It doesn't involve coding at all. like that kind of thing. So the impulsivity was like a bad problem for me growing up. Like one of the worst examples, and like my wife loves to bring this one up, was I had a car that I loved. I had a G6E Turbo.
Ooh.
And it was like my first car that I was able to buy like outright. And I absolutely loved it. You know, it was like my pride and joy. And I went full driving with my mate one time. And the next week, I'm talking like full driving on Friday. Monday, I sold my car, walked straight into the dealership. I need a full drive, man. Like, I love full driving. It's my thing.
Wow.
And I got a Jeep. Like 2 weeks later, I was like, I hate this Jeep, man.
I should never
back
sold
to
the
another
G60.
car dealership. Like, hey, I don't want this Jeep. I want like a Ute. Got a Ute, you know, like, and losing money along the way, like an idiot here.
Yeah.
And then just like looking back, going like, well, yeah, maybe that's an impulsivity issue.
Yeah.
Like maybe normal people or neurotypical people, I should say, don't make those kind of decisions like in a day because they went forward driving one time.
Yeah.
You're like, well, I'm a forward drive enthusiast now.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to this topic because I want to, hear your thoughts because you've obviously done a bit more reflection as you've gotten older, right? But let's go back to you as a kid. So, how long did you live in Queensland till?
My whole life.
Your whole life.
Until 19 when I joined the ADF.
Okay. So, and did you have any siblings?
I don't know.
No. Okay. So only child, and your parents, like,
yes,
they were pretty supportive of everything that you did?
I was a single mum.
Oh, single mum, yep.
Only child, and I grew up in housing commission the entire time.
Wow. So, have you ever connected with your dad, or do you know what happened to him?
A little bit, yeah, here and there. Like, I'm aware of where he's at, and there's no ill feelings or anything. It was just the way it worked out between them, so.
Yep. Okay. Did you ever, I guess, as a kid, right, like, you're obviously okay with it now, but did you ever have any, like, ill feelings about it when you were a kid, or you never really
thought about it, you know? It was just, like, ops normal for me. It was just used to my mum and I, so I never looked at other families and was like, oh, I wish I had what they had. I just was living my life, yeah.
Yep. Okay. So then, aside from the ADHD, like, you didn't do a lot of sport in primary school then?
No, basically none.
Did it help you to study? Were you good academically?
I was in primary school, yeah. I was a pretty good student.
Yep.
Pretty good student. And then in hindsight, there's a pretty clear path change when I got off the medication.
Yeah.
So from like grade 8, 9, 10, which was the end of my high schooling life, grade 10, a very different student.
Yeah. So, okay. When you decided to finish high school in year 10 and not continue on to year 12, like, was there a particular reason? Like, was there something that you wanted to do, or?
Basically just didn't want to go to school.
Yeah.
I told my mum, like, I want to work, I want to get an apprenticeship.
Yep.
And she was like, look, that's fine, but you got to do it straight away.
And
I dragged it out for like a year and like, just played Xbox and Halo like every day until eventually was like, no more, get an apprenticeship. And on top of that, I was pulled into the office like right towards the end of the grade 10. And they just said to me like, hey, don't bother putting in an application for grade 11 and 12. You're not coming back.
Oh, wow.
You need to go to another school.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, cool.
Were you always getting in trouble at school?
At that point, yeah, I was being pretty naughty.
Yeah. Can you elaborate on what sort of things you were doing?
Yeah, like, so, as I said, I came off the medication and went to a new school. I went to high school. And being in housing commission, you get a range of people, like people that are elderly and need housing support, single mothers, all the way down to people that are drug addicted or people with just big families and not a lot of money. So a range of people in that world. And you're a product of your environment, I suppose. And I was, looking back, I suppose I was looking for leadership in a way, like male leadership, because I didn't have the dad, even though I wasn't thinking about it at the time.
Yep.
It was probably a subconscious thing that was occurring. And I kind of got taken under the wing of some guys in that housing commission units that I was in who were a little bit older than me and a little bit naughty. And that kind of got me down the path of
doing the wrong thing.
Like I'm involved in this crew, like they like me. They're like, we're loyal to each other.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd really felt that. So I guess you get that in a sporting team, you get it in a footy team or something. And I never did. Yeah. So I jumped head on into that kind of stuff.
Yep. Were you still doing the karate at that time, or?
I'd stopped karate, and I wasn't really doing anything apart from just like gaming.
Yep.
And being naughty from pretty much like 12 to 16. I got back into martial arts at 16.
16. Okay. So what martial art did you go back to?
I went to Jeet Kune Do school up in Brisbane. I think integrated martial arts up there.
Oh, yep.
Under Cookie Vasilu.
Okay.
And she's quite well known up there. And they had a range of things. They had Jeet Kune Do, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu. So that was my introduction to training mixed martial arts. Right? It wasn't an MMA gym, but they followed Bruce Lee's theories of like, you train everything that you can.
Yep.
And they had Eskrima, Filipino Kali, Jiu-Jitsu. So that was my introduction to mixing the arts. And when I saw the Muay Thai guys training, I was like, oh, that's it. Right? Like the sports that fight, that's the one.
Yeah.
Like that's what I need to do.
Yeah. Okay. So then when you had to go find your apprenticeship, what did you end up jumping into? So you had a year off playing Xbox, and then it was like, okay, mum's like, okay, no more. I have to go find an apprenticeship.
Yep.
What did you find?
Ended up in spray painting, like automated refinishing.
Yep.
If you want to give it a fancy name.
Yep. Panel beating, or not panel beating. It's the actual painting side
of it. Yeah. So they used to be combined.
Yep.
And then they split off into 2 separate apprenticeships.
Yeah. Wow.
And my uncle was a panel beater spray painter.
Okay.
Combined.
Yep.
So I was like, that's the only like tradie dude that I know. So I'll just try to do what he does.
Yep.
And man, I sucked at that. Hey,
Did you?
I was so bad. I mean, if you know anything about painting, it's all about preparation.
Yeah.
And
you got to sand. You got to take the time.
ADHD people not good at fine detail preparation. So like I sucked at it, man. And I tried so hard to be good. Like every day I'd wake up, be like, I'm not going to fuck up today. And I would.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I got 3 years into that and was like, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And everybody told me to keep going, finish
it off.
Finish
yeah,
it
now a
off.
year to go.
And I was like, nah, man, I'm the type of person like, I'll get stuck. If I finish the apprenticeship and I get a tradie job, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be stuck like some of these other guys that hated their jobs but wouldn't leave it. I said, no, I'm cutting it off. I'm never doing this again. I'm leaving it unfinished so that I never fall back on it. Like I don't want to fall back on it.
Yep.
And I was like, I'm going to the ADF. That's what I want to do.
Yep. Okay. So then did you have a conversation with your mum to go and say, Mum, I want to go join the ADF? Was she cool with it?
Yeah, she was fine. And by that stage, I'd moved out. Like,
okay.
I'd moved out with some of the other apprentices, living in a share house, like 5 of us, like a big Queenslander in Cannon Hill, just running amok. So I was already getting a bit more adult at that stage. Like, spending like $150 of my $250 paycheck on rent.
Yeah, wow.
And then the other on the gym.
Yep.
And then like $50 on mee goreng and eggs.
Yeah, trying to survive.
Yeah.
Was it pretty wild in that share house?
Yeah, it was pretty fun. I think at one point everybody had a girlfriend, so there was like 10 people living in there.
Wow.
And at that stage, it was only like $450 like a week for a Queenslander.
Yeah.
So like it was pretty fun.
Ended up being cheaper.
yeah, it was good.
Fair enough. So when you joined the Defence Force, which part of it did you go into? The Army, Navy, Air Force? Navy. Why the Navy? Why did you pick the Navy?
It's just the quickest thing, to be honest. Like at that point, the share house thing had kind of fallen apart. Like everyone had moved on.
Yep.
They were all a bit older than me, and it kind of fell apart to a bit where I got left with the lease. Like I kind of got hustled a little bit.
Oh wow.
Where my friends were like, oh, man, we got to sign this other lease, but they won't let us do it while we have a current lease. Could you just like sign us out of this, but we'll stay and we'll pay rent and like, don't worry. And I was like, yeah, of course. And like, as soon as I signed them all out of the lease, they just like disappeared.
Yeah.
And I probably deserved it. Like, and I was probably a crappy housemate as well.
Yeah.
But everything was kind of falling apart for me at that stage. Like the apprenticeship was done. I was just dishwashing at a cafe. My girlfriend had left me. And like I couldn't go back to my mum's place. It's just too small at that point coming back. And I was like, man, it's all or nothing. Like I got to get in. So whatever you can get me in as, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Navy was the service that had the biggest requirement. So I just took whatever I could get.
Yep. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the Navy then. So what was that experience like for you? So I guess, was there like an entrance exam or something that you had to do to get in? I'm guessing there would have been a medical and that sort of stuff. Yeah,
so I had to pass an equivalency test for, I think it was grade 11, because I didn't do it. This was just like a math and English test, and I was fine. I passed it, no drama. So that was the only thing I was a little bit worried about. Like, I might be stuck just going like just the lower entrance level jobs.
Yep.
and I wanted to do something kind of in the middle.
Yep.
So I did that exam, and that was fine. I passed it, and the experience was definitely new, right? Like, go down to Melbourne, got in really quick. Like 3 months after I started trying to get in, I was on a bus going down to Melbourne for recruit school.
Yep.
And like I said before, I wanted a fresh start. Like, I'm leaving everything behind. I sold everything I had. I just took nothing with me except for clothes.
Yep.
And I probably went in a little gun-ho, I suppose. You know, I'd been like a big movie guy, so like Full Metal Jacket, Platoon,
Yeah.
all these movies I had in my head of like what it would be like. And at the time, I was pretty fit because I was still training, and I was doing CrossFit, and I was lifting. And I was really worried I'd get down there and there'd just be these killers everywhere. And I'd just be like the bottom of the barrel guy. And that wasn't the case, because it's normal, everyday people that sign up. It's not a movie.
Yeah.
And I had a bit too much of a focus on like fitness and being tough and being like, you know, oh, I'll show them how important I am, like day one. And that's just not how it works in the real military. You know, you just, chain's as strong as the weakest link is what they always say. So I was a bit mean, I think, at the start to people, where it would be like, I get mad at people who were coming last in like PT. So I was probably a bit of a dick, to be honest. And I don't think I made too many friends off the bat. And then I calmed down as I moved out of recruit school and into the real force.
Yeah.
And realized like, oh, it's not Hollywood. No one wants you to come in here and do 100 push-ups and like be the hero. Like, you got to be the grey man. You got to be the guy that can take orders and just shut up.
Yep.
So that was a new thing for me to learn.
Yeah. Did you, you know, it sort of feels like you had this bit of a chip on your shoulder.
100%, yeah.
You know, obviously with the way things were at the end of your time in Queensland before you joined the Defence Force, it was like, you know, you sort of got a bit hustled by your mates, and, you know, you came out of a relationship. So all of these things are sort of playing into that, where it's like, okay, was it like, did you ever think that you were just sort of like trying to punish yourself a little?
Yeah, partly like that maybe, and also just, I think, being a young kid, like 19 years old, without a like authority figure that was a male in my life, and trying to have this fresh start, like I'll just come in as a new person, you know, like I was just probably trying to find myself, and I wasn't even aware of ADHD as much as I am now. Like, I just didn't believe in it. I didn't think it was affecting me. But anyone who's met someone who's ADHD knows that you can be up and down, and you can get like really, really spun up by things. And this is a really intense environment with a lot of people. So I was probably just freaking out in my head a lot, you know what I mean? And trying to control myself and find myself. Yep.
Yeah, I think when you get in those manic phases, it's like you want to try and control everything. And then you sort of have to, the only thing that you sort of you end up coming full circle, and then you realize that you can't control everything.
No, yeah.
And so then you've only got two options. You can keep fighting and make yourself feel like shit.
Yeah.
Or you can sort of just surrender a little and just go, okay, it'll be okay. You know, like things aren't going to be this, you know, massive pile of shit that I'm imagining.
Yeah.
You know, if I just give it a moment and just relax for a second.
Yeah.
Let's just watch it unfold a little bit.
Basically, yeah. I had to get my head pulled in a bit, right? Where like, again, I was like, oh, I'm the maverick guy. Like, you want to go in and be like so good that people are like, let's just promote this dude straight away. Like, it's just, again, it's not the real world. Yeah. Right? You've got a job to do.
Yeah. And you're seeking approval as well. You know, you want people to recognize you and feel like, hey, you know, here I am. Like, I've been a small guy my whole life. Like, you try and make up for that with whether it's a bigger personality or a bigger voice, or you do these other things like that have some bravado. And, you know, when hearing you talk about it, like I can sort of reflect even in terms of my own high school life. Like, I probably was a bit, what's the right word? Like, I used to brag about certain things, you know, and like I sort of, I can reflect on it and say, you know, I was just compensating, right? You compensate for all of these things in your life that it's almost like you are aware of these weaknesses, but to try and hide them from everybody else, you make them into something that, like, you know, that they don't affect you at all.
Yeah.
And that you're this and you're that. And when really all it is that you need to try and address is you need to try and address that weakness. Yeah. Right? It's almost like, I wouldn't say it's denial, it's diversion. You're diverting yourself away from thinking about these things that are very difficult, and sort of coming to terms with, hey, you know, it's okay to be like this.
Yeah.
Right? Like you sort of get so wound up that, oh, life is meant to be like this. You know, you watch it in the movies. I should be Maverick. I should be Tom Cruise from Top Gun. You know, I don't want to be Goose. You know, I don't want to be the poor guy that, you know, has a family but dies. You know, I don't want to be Iceman, you know, because Iceman's not cool.
Yeah.
You know, Iceman seems like a bit of a dick.
Yeah.
But when you actually think about it, you know, is he the dick or is
Yeah.
is Maverick actually the dick?
Yeah, yeah. And then you watch the new Top Gun and like Iceman's like the admiral, and you're like, yeah, that's why. He's not a dick. And Maverick's still just Maverick.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good. You know, it taught me a lot. Like, I mean, I think I'm self-deprecating at times. You know, just because I try to keep myself humble.
Yeah.
Because I think you need to always do that.
Yep.
And when I got there, I guess I was expecting like if we had so we have like a 2.4K run, and I wasn't the fittest guy. There was 2 guys ahead of me that were fitter than me, but I was always in like the top 5 finishing the race or like whatever the physical stuff was. I was doing like fairly well at it.
Yep.
And I guess I was looking for like applause and like a pat on the back, like wow, you're so good, man. But it was like, okay, we're gonna do this run. You get there first, and they're like, cool. Now run to the back of the group and
help them.
And you'd be like, why?
Yeah,
they should have got more fit. Like that was my mindset at the time. Like, what do you mean? I put like 6 months of training to show up here fit, ready to go, and people are showing up here day one failing their fitness test. Like, why aren't they getting on a bus going home? Like, I just didn't understand it at the time. I had like a wrong attitude. I wasn't looking at it like a team.
Yeah.
You know, where they're like, yeah, cool, run back now and encourage the other people.
Yeah.
So it took a little bit of learning to be like, yeah, especially a ship. Like a ship is not driven by one person.
Yeah.
Everybody has to work together.
Yeah. So what's the pathway, I guess, that you went through in the Navy? So what were the roles that you had to go through? Yeah.
So the first 4 years I was a combat systems operator, which is just like radar operation and like all the combat sensors and things like that, tactical warfare kind of training. And I enjoyed that. Like, it was really cool to learn about that kind of stuff. But the reality of the job is like 90% looking at a surface radar and not seeing anything for like weeks at a time. You know, oh, there's a merchant ship. Like, cool.
I found something at least.
It's gone. And then, so once I got to the point where there's a few roles in the Navy or ADF that you got to be in first. Like some of them are like naval police or military police, air crewmen. And for me, physical training instructor is another one. Yeah, you've got to be ready to be promoted to leading seaman, which is like a corporal equivalent in the Army. The first rank that's a non-commissioned officer. You have to be ready for promotion to that, and then you can apply to become like those higher roles kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted to do, like change over to physical training instructor. So I did that after 4 years.
Yep.
And then I did another 4 years as a PTI, and then I got out.
Okay. So you spent 8 years in the Army in total?
Yeah, just under.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, in the Navy, yeah. So in your time in the Navy, were there any, did you establish any good mentors? Like, were there any good mentors that actually said to you, hey, you know, Zach, you do this well, but you need to calm down here and here? You know, did you get any of that sort of, I guess, that male guidance?
Yeah.
That you were looking for?
So many good people in there, like so many driven people.
Yeah.
Depending on the branch, which is like what they call the different jobs, right? Like you had a maritime warfare officer on the other day. So he was executive branch, like I was executive branch as well. You've got like marine engineering, weapons electrical engineering and things like that. There's your branches. And then you have your rate categories, which is your specific job. So for me, I was a combat systems operator. That was my rate category. So depending on the role, you had different types of people. And in the physical training instructor world, it was all extremely driven people. You know, it's the most physical course in the Navy underneath the clearance diver and the air crewman.
Yep.
So you had to be at a certain level of fitness to do it, a certain level of motivation to do it. And not only fitness, but, you know, like public speaking, you know, the ability to lead a large class, ability to do admin. And all of the guys that were in that branch with me were all successful outside of the Navy as well, and just super driven.
So when you say successful outside of the Navy, like was that during their time in the Navy or when they've come out?
Yeah, a lot of them would have businesses on the side, like either be doing their own PT stuff on the side, or they'd be running like businesses that had nothing to do with their current role. Like, it was just people that were non-stop.
Yep.
You know, they weren't happy to settle and just chill. always moving.
Yep.
And so I always look up to a lot of those guys.
Yeah, okay. So then, was your time all spent in Melbourne, or did they move you around?
Oh yeah, I moved around a bunch. I did all my sea time as a combat systems operator was out of the West in Perth.
Yep.
So I spent 3 years posted in Perth, and then I came back to Sydney for like 6 months for a 2-year posting, and then 6 months in, they called me and said go back to Perth. So I went back to Perth. So I did a back and forth Sydney Perth.
Yep.
And a lot of trips around.
Yep.
Maybe like, I don't know exactly, but 25 countries or something
Wow.
over that time.
So when you go on those trips, what is it for? Is it just to like, patrols or something like that? Or
Yeah, all different kind of stuff. I did Middle East trip, which was great. That's what I wanted when I got in. That was kind of like the big thing at the time. Like you want to do the most serious trip.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough, just luck, right place. My first ship posting was to fly to Bahrain. 19 years old, never left Brisbane except for going down to Melbourne. Training for 6 months or whatever, and then on a plane to Bahrain. Get to Bahrain to sail the ship back to Australia, which took about 3 weeks.
Yep.
And we stopped off in Sri Lanka along the way. So that was my first experience to like going outside of the country.
Yeah.
And then it was a mix of like operational trips and exercise trips, basically.
Yep. So when you guys have those stopovers, like in Sri Lanka and things like that, do you have downtime to be able to get off the ship and do some walking around and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you obviously would have done a lot of exploring then.
Yeah, a fair bit.
Are there any sort of things that you, and I guess, for you having never travelled overseas prior to that, it would have been quite confronting to see how all these different cultures and different people live, right?
Yeah. And I think anyone who grows up in Australia would have been told like how lucky you are. My grandma would always say like, you don't understand how lucky you are. And you're like, yeah, whatever, like, sure. And as soon as I got to Sri Lanka, I was like, oh, now I get it. It's just so different. Like there's such a poverty difference that I'd never seen in my life. Like the poorest people in Australia on the coast. So I'm not talking about some of the communities on the inside. I can't speak to that. But the coastal cities, the poorest people in the coastal cities are still so rich compared to the people in places like Sri Lanka or places like India. So it was a real eye opener at 19 to kind of see, people on the street with amputated legs, like not covered up and stuff, still like flies on them and asking for money, kids asking for money. People in such poor conditions, and just across the road, people in such lavish conditions. So it was a real eye opener. Like, oh yeah, we are lucky. Yeah,
there are certain countries, like I still remember once when I went to Indonesia, and to see the disparity in wealth. Like there's some really wealthy people in Indonesia, and then there's the poorest of the poor.
Yeah.
And there was actually, I actually remember this, like I was in a van, and because we were all getting taken somewhere, like to the next stop or whatever. But I remember seeing this, it was a beggar who had like obviously was disabled, like had some deformities or whatever. But I can't remember if it was a male or a female, but they were putting their leg on the road to get run over so that, they, whether it's to get like, more pity or more money, so to speak, but like to actually choose to do that, to seek to harm yourself further, or whether it's like, I guess a little bit of, well, if you die, it doesn't really matter anyway.
Yeah.
But, to see somebody like, with open wounds trying to do that, it's very like, I don't know what the right word is to sort of describe it, but, you sort of reflect on that and you go, wow, like how you almost don't look at them as human, but they are human. You know, you have to create this separation in your mind.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like when you try and imagine what this person's must have their life must have been like for them to be that way.
Yeah.
Right? It's like how?
Yeah. Growing up here, you just can't imagine it.
Yeah.
Right. And I know it's like a modern day thing gets teased a little bit, like, oh, travel. I know everybody can't travel, whatever financial position they're in, but I do believe, like, if you live in Australia, you live in a wealthy country, like, you got to get out at least one time, go somewhere that is not as wealthy and just see what's going on. Because apart from just like the confronting part about that poverty and the way of life, it was also to see how people could be so happy. you know, I can remember just the smiles on people's faces. They didn't have anything, but they were just like either playing with their kids or kicking the soccer ball or even just chatting to us. And like the amount of like hope and joy and happiness that they had, even though they didn't have anything and nothing was going to get better, but they weren't complaining and they weren't like, they were hustling all the time.
Yeah.
You know, and if you've traveled, you've seen it, you know, like it can be 3 a.m. You can get anything. There's still a guy on the side of the road selling mobile phones at 3 a.m. They just don't stop hustling.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was something that I was like, yeah, how come people can be so miserable when they have everything?
Yeah.
And these guys have nothing.
Yeah.
And they still manage to keep like a smile on their face and you know.
It's the materialistic trap, right? Like,
Yeah.
because you attain something and then you go, oh, now I need to have more. But then the problem is that when you have nothing, when it all gets taken away from you, if you end up like say bankrupt or whatever the case may be, you could spiral out of control because you've had something and now you've lost it, and you feel like the world owes you because you've lost it when it could have been your own, you know, failing that's caused you to lose it. Yeah. Right. Whereas I think for these people, and you know, like one of my other teammates, Percy, who's coming on the podcast, he was talking about when he was growing up in Kenya, and he actually was living in this house. Like it was like it's like a share house almost, and there's 2 levels to this house. There's a house up the back and there's a house down the bottom, and the one up the top was basically where all the birds would actually roost, and so the house is actually full of shit. Yeah, and they used to sleep there. That's where they slept. Yeah. And you know, he would tell me, like I asked him about, you know, how did people respond when they would ask you about your upbringing, and then a lot of people would say in Australia they'd be like, oh, that's really sad, and he's like, you know, when I reflect back on it, it's actually some of the happiest times in my life. You know, because every morning it was fun. Like I just go downstairs and like my friends are there. Yeah. You know, and it's like community living, right? Like
it's very different.
Very different vibe. Whereas, you know, even if you live in an apartment in Sydney, you don't really play with any of your neighbours. No. It's a bit different. Yeah,
it's very different.
Whereas, you know, I think, you know, like for you growing up in housing commission, at least there was some form of community, and you found a bit of a community there, even though they weren't necessarily the right influences. It's almost like, you know, when you grow up as a kid in a cul-de-sac, you know, you become friends with the other kids in the cul-de-sac as well. So I think there's something to that, you know, like when life is simple, you know, we always want more, but at the same time, sometimes simplicity is the true, you know, goal of happiness, right? Yeah. Like you do find happiness in the simple things and the simple pleasures in life.
Yeah. And you've got to be able to, you know, life is tricky and there's no correct way to live it, I suppose. And, you know, you can't be like, as someone who's living here having legitimate problems, it's no good saying to them like, well, this kid in Sri Lanka, he's even worse. Like that doesn't help anybody. No. You know, everybody's just living their life and everybody's problems are valid just in the scale of their context. Yeah. So I don't like to be like, oh, well, you shouldn't have anything. You shouldn't be materialistic. It's just, it is what it is, right? You live the life that you live. Yeah. And I'm not about to go live on the street because other people are. Yeah. Like I try to help as much as I can, but as you said, you have to kind of disassociate it a bit because you walk through a country like Cambodia, you're going to walk into someone every 2 meters that needs help. Yeah. And you'll be broke before you get down the street if you give everybody money. Yeah. So it is a really hard thing to be like, what do you do? What do you do? You can't help everybody. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny like that. And so there's a lot of people that have this idea that, oh, you know, if we could just redistribute the wealth, you know, that'd fix the problem. But, you know, the problem is that when you really think about if you could actually, you know, magically click a button and redistribute all the wealth, like it would still end up just being exactly the same as what it was, because people that generally tend to accumulate wealth have habits that lead them to accumulate wealth. Yeah. Whereas people that generally don't accumulate wealth have habits, whether it's spending, vices, gambling, you name it, you know, those sorts of things, which might take away from their ability to accumulate wealth. Yeah. Because I think, you know, one of the things that a lot of people don't really think about is that, you know, making money is a mindset, because money actually really, what is money? Like it doesn't technically exist. Now it's not attached to any gold standard. It's a piece of paper that it's just because we ascribe that there's value to it. That, you know, if I give you this $50 note and you're supposed to give me back $55 or whatever the case may be, we ascribe this value that, you know, that's what it is attached to it. But, you know, in real world now, like it's like, if you really think about it, like if everything was to just sort of fall to pieces, like that piece of paper doesn't mean anything. That plastic note that you've got means nothing, you know? So it's a really interesting sort of thing to think about, because, you know, I think the common problem that a lot of people have is that they look at somebody that has money and they go, oh, you know, that it should be unlawful for somebody to be that rich. Yeah. You know, if you think about like a billionaire,
and it'd be like, oh, how can this person, accumulate so much wealth? That's disgusting. They should give it away, right? So there's people that would have that sort of mentality to approach to it. But I think if you actually think about, okay, how did this person accumulate this wealth? And yes, there could be people like, a Pablo Escobar who accumulates all this wealth doing naughty things, right? But there could be a legitimate person, say, whether it's like an Elon Musk or somebody that's achieved it through solving problems, right? So, SpaceX solves problems. It solves the problem of getting things into space. As a result of that, he deserves to actually generate some income from that. Just like any business, right? Like any business, the martial arts business, we teach your kids or we teach you skills that you whether you use them to defend yourself, whether you are passionate about your health and fitness, it helps you with your mental state. These are the things that you're exchanging your money for to accumulate this other knowledge, right? So everything is always this exchange. I guess, having gone and seeing how so many different people live, did that make you reflect on your own life a little bit, when you came back and I guess towards your end of the time in the army and in the Navy? And I'm kind of curious as to why you decided to leave the Navy as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I was doing a lot of countries, like a lot of trips. I spent a lot of time at sea. Not a lot of time if you compare me to guys that have been in for 20 years or something, but my first 4 years I spent like 3 of those years at sea or on a seagoing vessel.
Yep.
On a very active ship, so a lot of countries. So I was able to reflect on that and be like, oh, I didn't have it so bad. Like these people would kill to live in housing commission units, like with a nice little park in the middle. Someone comes and mows the grass every week. Like, yeah, some people might look down on that in Australia, like, oh, how's those, but they don't understand that that's like a top tier community for some of these people that would absolutely kill to live where I lived and grew up and have the support that I had. Coming into why I left, the sea time was a big part of it. Like as someone who loves martial arts and wanted to be a fighter and wanted to be a coach, it was so hard to constantly be away from that. And it was just grinding on me, like being at sea constantly, being away constantly, moving constantly. Like from a martial arts sense, I was a white belt for 4 years because I just had to keep going to a new gym every few months. And no one's going to promote you. No matter how you're rolling, they need to get to know you, your personality, your values. Then it took me another 4 years to go from blue belt to purple belt because it's the same thing. I'm just moving and moving and moving and moving. And I was getting so frustrated, like, man, I'm never, ever going to get anywhere, right? Like, I could stay in the Navy forever and just bank a paycheck.
Yeah.
Or I could get out and try to go after the stuff that I love. And it's just like the apprenticeship, people were like, man, don't get out, just stay in, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, you got to take that leap of faith sometimes.
So because when you went to the Defence Force, obviously there would have been some combat training and things like that. But I guess how does it fit together? Because you were always passionate about the mixed martial arts side of things? So ever since the time that you started training at 16 through to 19, that was something that you wanted to do?
Yeah.
And then obviously when you joined the Defence Force, you're moving around a lot, so it's very difficult to sort of have that consistency. Why did you want to fight in the first place? Like, was there a particular reason?
Yeah, I probably like a lot of martial artists, right? You're either some bullying where you can't defend yourself, like we spoke before, being smaller, not a very physical kid, not playing rugby or something like that. And I went to karate, and I'd already had some martial arts experience because one of my friends growing up was like Bruce Lee obsessed. So I'd seen lots of his movies and like we'd spar and stuff in the backyard, but no formal training.
Yep.
And I'm doing karate. I'm like a green belt at this stage, and I get the piss beat out of me at school by this other kid.
Yeah, wow.
And he punched me in the back of the head. I hit my head on the wall. I went down. I turned around, and then he stomped me and was like punching me on the ground. And I'm like fucking trying to up block and, like side block.
Yeah.
And I just got the piss beat out of me. And
what was it over?
I can't even remember. It was just like some stupid schoolyard thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Like I think I had picked up something that like his little brother had dropped. It was like a toy had been dropped like on the field, like it's an empty field or something. And I picked this thing up and just like was carrying it. And he must have thought I was trying to steal his brother's toy or something. So he just like ran up and cracked me in the back of the head.
Wow.
And my first thought was like, so if we do it as karate and stuff, they're usually facing the person. What happens if you're just on the ground and they're just punching you in the head? And there's like no answer, right? Like the karate senseis were just like, no, just walk away. Bro, like I was cornered in like an alcove with like 10 other kids around me. Like what do I do?
Yeah.
Cover up. And I was just like, okay, I'm done with this sport, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have an answer for this. I'm done with this sport.
Yeah.
And that's where I went to Jeet Kune Do, because I was like, well, Bruce Lee's the guy. What's he think?
Yeah.
So that was where I was like, when we spoke about like trying to overcompensate a little bit, I was like, I'm a bit of a pussy, I suppose. I'm getting beat up. I'm scared of fighting. Like I'm not a physical kid with an athletic background, and I'm mouthy. So I'm always getting cracked. Like, I don't know how many, I wouldn't even say there were street fights because there weren't fights. It was just me getting cracked. Like, cracked at parties, like from the side, like, hey, can I have a drink? No, bang.
What?
Like, yeah, constantly, man, constantly. Like,
Wow.
and it was just getting ridiculous. And like I said, I'm probably brought some of it on myself. Like I'm a bit of a joker.
You must have had some pretty good singers to obviously get under the nerve of people that quickly.
And I think it was just, I was an easy target. Like I'm a small guy who's like into martial arts. So it was like some dude could just come over and whack me and be like, look how tough I am then.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, what can I do, to like overcome this? So I just kept training martial arts. I wasn't really planning to fight. I just wanted to get confident. And I'd moved from, at this point, I'm probably about 17, 18. And I'd moved to another gym in Brisbane called Sassam MMA in Wollongabba under my old coach, Marcus. And there was a guy there, and he was older than me, real jacked dude. Like, and I always looked at him in the gym because we had a weights gym attached. And I was going in there doing like preacher curls with like no idea what I was doing. And he would give me some tips. And his name was Mark. And I asked him about himself and what he does. And he said, I'm a male stripper at the moment. And I said, oh, really, man? Like, I wouldn't have suspected that. Like, how did you get there? And he was like, look, I was a really anxious kid, and I was bullied a lot in school, and like I was so scared of speaking in front of people or being in front of people. And one day I said to myself, what's the most extreme thing I could do to take myself out of this mindset? And he was like, it would be to be like naked or like in your underwear in front of people. So he's like, that's what I did. I don't want to be a stripper, but my goal was to get myself to a point where I could feel confident enough to stand in front of a room of people in my underwear. And like by this point, he'd been training for years. He was absolutely yoked. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be a stripper, but what's the most extreme thing I could do to conquer my fears, which at the time was conflict.
Yeah.
And I was like, MMA fighting. Like, I got to become an MMA fighter. Like, that's how I will overcome this, right? Like, I take myself from being too scared to fight someone in a party or punch them back to I'll go in there and fight a guy who's ready to fight, who's preparing to fight. And everyone's eyes will be on me.
Yep.
So that was kind of the goal, like overcome that by getting into a cage fight.
Yep. So then how old were you when you had your first one?
Like 24 or something. So I'd been in the Navy for a few years, and I'd done the trip and come back. We had like 6 months off, so I was able to just like train a bunch and jump in and have an amateur. Yep. It was like C-class, Shuto back then.
Yep. And then what was that? Do you remember much about the experience? Like, I guess.
Yeah. It was great. It was a great experience. Like, it felt like all that hard work had paid off. Like, I wasn't a professional. I didn't win anything. It was just like a smoker fight at the time kind of thing. But it was nice to see, like, hey, I set a goal for the first time in my life. I set a goal, not a short-term goal, a long-term goal from like 17, 18 to 24 or 23 or something. And I achieved it. And originally I just wanted to do that one fight just to overcome those demons, I suppose. But then I was like, hey, I'm doing pretty good. Like, coaches at that point were like, hey, you're doing pretty well in sparring against guys. Your grappling's good. Like, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just keep going. Just keep going until I get sick of it, or until I feel like I've reached a ceiling where I'm like, all right, that'll do. This thought came into my mind, so I have to ask this. When you're in your teenage years
and obviously, you became a bit of a target. Did you ever have like those dreams where you'd be fighting?
Yeah.
And then, but you'd feel like ineffective?
Yeah, you can't swing punches.
Yeah.
And stuff. Yeah, all the time.
All the time? Oh, okay. So I got to say, so this was me too, right? Like, like throughout my teenage years, I'd always have this dream that, whether it could be something like an attacker, somebody trying to rob you, or my one was like, so there's like these Chinese movies and they have like, they call them hopping corpses, and it's like a zombie, right? But they hop, right? It looks really awkward and funny, but when you think about it. But I'd have this dream, like, whether it's a hopping corpse after me after watching one of those Chinese ghost movies or whatever. And like, yeah, like I'd like, whereas in one of the dreams I remember I tried to pick up a baseball bat and I'd swing it as hard as I could, and it'd just feel like nothing, like you just something. Like a feather, like you just, you didn't do any damage, or, you'd try and kick and it'd be like you can't even kick properly, you can't punch properly. And then it was quite interesting because a couple of times I actually woke myself up because I did manage to kick, and I kicked the wall and stubbed my toe. But I was just curious whether you had a lot of those dreams as well, because I feel like, for any person that, and I think when most people look at me, they probably go, oh, Johnny, he's not afraid of conflict. Like, I've used to do a lot of negotiation for sales and all that sort of stuff. But I think, when I think most boys would probably have that sort of, what's the right word? Where that sort of trepidation about combat, right? And unless you've actually tested yourself and been through that, and after you've gone through those experiences and you realize, oh, you can hurt somebody or you can control somebody, then that sort of like just disappears.
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember like when that stopped for you? Did that stop when you started getting really into martial arts?
Yeah. Like once I learned about like not only the physical side, but a little bit of like the mental posturing side, like the dog's bark is worse than its bite kind of thing. And I noticed like a lot of the time someone try to have like a physical conflict with you, if you just immediately back down, it would usually go even worse because they'd be like, oh, I got this guy.
Yeah, you're scared.
Whereas later I'd just kind of be like, okay, let's go. And I'd be like, it would fizzle out. Like they'd go find an easier target.
Yeah.
And I was also being like less of a mouthy prick, I suppose. So I ran into less problems, I was humbled along my journey constantly. And it was probably somewhere around that initial fight, like a bit earlier than that, when I was now sparring with good dudes and training with good guys and being like, man, if I can hang with these dudes, like some random dude doesn't bother me. Yeah. And as long as you're safe, like I said, you get hit by the back of the head, you can be the best martial artist in the world. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. So street fighting is not martial art. No. It's not fighting. No. Yeah. Like it's a completely different thing. And I've seen, violent street fights in my time, guys in a fight and then hit from the side with like a milk crate, and like jaw broken, blood everywhere. So like anyone who's got that thought process of like, oh, I'm an MMA guy, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy, I'm a boxer, I can handle people on the street. You're just straight wrong. Yeah. It's not the same thing.
There's too many variables.
Too many variables. It's not the same thing.
It's the other guy's mate that comes in with 100%. A flying sidekick or something like that, or, the bottle, or
100%.
There's all those sorts of things that, that change the scenario versus, when you're locked in one-on-one. That's why most street fights don't go more than 30 seconds.
Before someone jumps in.
Whereas most cage fights, generally go more than one round. Yeah. Right? Like,
and that was the thing, I think, seeing like real savage dudes that could kick the shit out of most people. They were just nice. Yeah. They were friendly people. They didn't get into fights in the street. They could go to a bar and have a nice night. And then guys who didn't train at all, who could go to a bar and be in a fight every single weekend. And so I just grew to know how to avoid that stuff, how to talk it down. If someone bumps into you and it's like, what? You're like, yeah, sorry, mate, it's all good. Yeah. That doesn't make you a pussy. That doesn't make you like less of a man. You know what I mean? It's like, whatever, man. It's so silly.
And I guess before we move on from the army topic, Navy topic, I keep saying army. I don't know what's wrong with me today.
Everyone always does that. It's all right.
But
it's the coolest service.
So when you were on your tours and things like that, were there ever any fights that broke out?
It was odd, like silly ones. Yeah. But nothing major. Like one of the funniest ones would have been when we were in the Middle East, a 6-month trip up there, and we're doing like 21, 25-day rotations before getting 2 or 3 days off. Yep. And you're going to be duty one of those days. If you're unlucky and you're there Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you're going to be duty Saturday, that's a 24-hour duty. 7 a.m. Saturday to 7 a.m. Sunday. Yeah. You got to blow 00 Saturday morning. Yep. and then, you know, so you pretty much not be able to do anything.
Yeah.
Like everyone else is like, oh, we're going to go 6 hours out and go whitewater rafting in this beautiful Sri Lankan river. You're like, well, I got to work Saturday, so I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
So people are getting pretty bored and people are getting pretty like sick of each other at certain points. And we had this FIFA tournament running and it was like super serious, like between like maybe 20 of us. We had 2 pools, you know, every rotation, the bottom 2 teams in Pool A would go down. The top 2 teams from Pool B would come up. We had like a secretary, a treasurer, like we had the whole thing, you know, we were like going all in. Excel spreadsheets, all this kind of stuff. And it was like really fun thing to do, you know, like, and there was a couple of punch-ons during that.
Wow.
Like people just fighting
Couldn't
over
hack it.
fighting over FIFA or something like that. Just like arguing that it was a practice game, not a legitimate game.
Yeah.
So there was a few like funny ones like that, but nothing ever too serious.
Fair enough. All right. So when you came out of the Navy, where did you decide to go from there?
So funnily enough, I didn't get much of a choice.
Oh.
I was going to Colombia. My wife is Colombian.
Okay.
And I was getting out March 2020. And
March 2020. Yep.
we all know what happened
Yeah,
March
COVID.
2020.
Yeah.
So I got out of the Navy on the Friday.
Yep.
I'd given everything in my apartment into storage. Was handing the keys back. It was a defense housing place, so I had to hand them back.
Mm-hmm.
I was no longer a Defence Force member, so I just had until like Monday morning, and then I was out. So I just was sleeping on the floor with my wife in our backpacks because we're going to Colombia for a year. You know, we got an apartment over there ready to go. Tickets are bought. Everything is ready to go.
Yep.
Get a text message. Qantas has cancelled your flight. Get another text message. Qantas has cancelled all flights.
Wow.
You know, go online. All flights in Australia are shut. No one's going anywhere. So we got nowhere to live. We got thousands and thousands of dollars of travel preparations out the window. I don't have a job anymore.
Mm.
And it was like, oh shit. That was not very good timing.
Yeah.
Like I could have just sat here for the next 3 years, you know, in my apartment.
Yep.
And we were fortunate enough to have friends that took us in, and we lived with them, and they were like, you know, we're eternally grateful to those guys for helping us out.
Mm.
My friend Matt and his family. And so it was just kind of like, okay, we're here in Sydney. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We get through COVID and then, you know, just do what we got to do.
Mm.
So that was a fun experience.
That would have been very challenging.
Yeah, very challenging, but prepared for it because of the military.
Yeah. So what did you do as like your first job when you're stuck in Australia? Came straight
Still
to
here.
VT1.
I was already working at VT1.
Okay.
I was doing Navy stuff all day, finishing, coming here to coach,
Okay.
training for fights and stuff. So
Yep.
I was fortunate enough. Obviously, the gym was closed, so I wasn't coaching at the time.
Mm.
But, you know, with the job keeper for my wife and the money that I had left over from the Navy, like, it was all sweet.
Yeah.
We were
Can just
fine.
survive, yeah. Fair enough. To switch gears a little bit, I guess, how did you meet your wife?
Just casual dating when I was in Perth, yeah. Yeah,
Oh,
we
so
actually met on Tinder.
In Perth?
Yeah, when I was back in Perth, yeah.
Wow. And then
She was
so
living
then
there.
you guys were meant to be leaving from Sydney to go to Colombia, and then you got stuck here, and then it's just basically, okay, we'll just stay here now.
Yeah, because I was already posted here. So we'd met in Perth back in like 2014 or something. I'd been posted to Sydney. We were living here together in the apartment. I was just working at one of the bases around the corner. And yeah, we were like, yeah, cool. We're going to go over there. Like, what better time? Like, you know, got money saved up from the forces and, you know, it's great. We'll go over there.
That would have also been a bit of a, you know, factor for you wanting to get out as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Getting into like a longer term relationship and getting married. So just wanted to like focus on my life. Given from 19 years old to 27 or something to the military and had a great time, and it kind of felt the same as the apprenticeship. Yeah, it's like it's now or never.
Yeah.
Get promoted too high, the paycheck's too good, the job's too chill.
Yeah.
Like you're not in the shit anymore.
Yep.
I'll never leave. I'll stay here forever.
Yeah, you get the golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
That's what I call them. You know,
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
because you know you start earning this income that go, oh, life's pretty good.
Yeah.
But then if you're going to work and then you're not satisfied because there's other things that you want to be doing in life, and it's like, oh, but if I leave, you know, I don't have this paycheck coming in.
Yeah.
So then, you know, what's the inverse of that is that you have all the time in the world, but none of the money to use it.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a fine balance in terms of how you approach it
Yeah.
in any vocation, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's just, I think it's always about what are the bigger picture objectives? So I just want to go back to you know, one of the points we were talking about earlier was in terms of reflection, right? So you've obviously done a bit more reflection in terms of thinking about, you know, your upbringing and life and your approach to things, you know, for you to decide to go back to Ritalin and medication and things like that, and reflecting on ADHD and things like that. Was that something that just happened progressively over time, or, you know, was there anything that happened that made you go, okay, I need to actually sit and think about this a little bit more?
Yeah, well, when I got out, I was fortunate enough to be taken care of by Department of Veterans Affairs, who do a great job, you know, supporting veterans and things like that. So they won't let people that just come straight out suffer, you know, so they help you with like study assistance and help you find, you know, what do you want to do.
Yep.
And I was also speaking to like a psych at the time, you know, just trying to get ready for everything, you know, to leave.
Oh, so they provide that service?
Yeah, DVA don't, but there's a service called Open Arms out there who provide like free not psychiatric, but psychology appointments and stuff for defense members, ex-defense members and their families. So just in preparation to get out and things like that, you know, because it's a big lifestyle change. And I was pretty like burnt out towards the end, just overall, you know, it's a hard role. And I was telling the counselor at the time, like, hey, I don't want to be here in like a couple of years and having not done anything, you know, having gotten out and given this up and then not achieved anything. And I got all this time, like we're in lockdown, there's so much time to do stuff. And I didn't do anything. Like I didn't get anywhere. Like COVID ends, it doesn't end, but you know, the lockdowns go away and it starts to wrap up and it's like, shit, man, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I had all this time to sit here and learn to code, learn whatever it was. I didn't do anything. And I had all the time in the world, and now the world's coming back. It's time to get back out there.
Yeah.
What did I do? And that was my wake-up call to like, okay, like there's obviously a problem here. You know, like I had all the opportunity to do something and I didn't do it. Even though I wanted to. Like, and that's a hard feeling, right? Because like people will be like, well, then you're just lazy. You're just like unmotivated. And it's like, whatever. That to me, that's not what it was. Like I was trying to do things, but just failing to do them. So that was what pushed me to be like, look, whatever I got to do to improve, I'll go down that path.
And I guess, you know, did you have a conversation with your wife about it?
Yeah, I spoke to her about it, and she was aware already that I'm ADHD and stuff, and she was super supportive and everything. But it was a long process to get back on medication. Like, was it? Yeah, long process. If you're a kid, man, they just throw it at you like Skittles. Yeah. If you're an adult, they'll treat you like a drug addict if you come and ask for it. Yeah. To do drug tests and blood. Obviously, blood and ECG, fair enough, but drugs of addiction test as well, because, you know, it's a Schedule 1, whatever you would equate that to. It's like a very restrictive medication here in Australia. Yep. So it was just a long process of, especially during COVID, it was so hard to get psych appointments and stuff. Like, so it took a while, but, you know, I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out.
So then in terms of, like, I guess your approach to life now, do you plan with longer term goals, short term goals, or how do you sort of approach things now?
Yeah, I've always done both. Like since being in the Navy, there were always big goal setting kind of place. Like every posting you went to, every new job, you had to sit down with your manager and write goals out. So I kept that up, you know, like long term, short term goals. So coming out, my goal was to fight. I had a fight on Super Fight against Jack Scollard. He was Central Coast guy. And then 3 months later, I had another fight. And that was the plan, you know, like every 3 months, back it up. Yep. And then like 18 months of COVID or whatever, just kind of threw a spanner in the works. So I was like, well, what can I do? Like, what can I focus on? Just coaching and getting better then is what I put my mind to at that point.
Yep. So then in terms of, because you've been coaching for a while now, like how do you feel that your coaching style sort of developed over the years?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough with that travel to train with so many coaches. You know, we were speaking before we jumped on about you training with the same coach for a long, long time. And there's a lot of value to that, training with the same people. But I also was very fortunate to travel so much and train at gyms all over the world and all over the country and meet so many different people and different teaching styles. So I think I'm just an amalgamation of everybody. Yeah. You know, and I've been criticized at times, not criticized, but people have picked me up at times for, I guess, crediting other people too much. Like I'll teach something and say, I learned this here, I saw this there. And people have said to me like, oh, you shouldn't say that. You should just teach it. You know, don't tell people that you learned it here or that you saw it there. And I'm always like, nah, man, like, why? Like, I'm not here to big note myself and try to convince people that I came up with this technique. It's just like, hey, I did my job, which is to go out and study and bring you the best material I can.
Yeah.
I don't care if you know that I got it from Danaher DVD or I watched 10 hours of Henry Cejudo fighting to get here. Like, that's my job.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't like when people will be like, oh, you know, I've been working on this and, bro, I know you watched it. I know you watched it on YouTube. Like, you can just say to someone, like, here's the specific video that I've been watching to teach you guys. So my coaching style has always been pretty open and honest with people.
Yep.
If you ask me something and I don't know it, I'm not going to give you a shit answer. I'll tell you who to go to.
Yep.
If you ask me something in the gym about Berimbolo, I'm going to be like, bro, I can't bolo to save my life. Go see James. Go see one of the other guys. They'll show you. So I think just that open, honest communication with your students about what you can give them, what you can't give them is really important. Because there's too many coaches out there that are like, oh, I'm the answer.
Yeah.
Come see me. I can help you. And it's like no one person's going to take you to the top. Yeah,
it's funny. One of the things that I always liked when I was still working in the automotive industry, I would always ask my employees, you know, what is the thing that you value the most? Like, what is your core value? Like, if you had to sort of distill yourself down to one core value, what would it be? And the easy way to sort of work it is like you put these things head to head, right? And the real answer is actually that it changes throughout your life, right? So when you're young, you know, you might value success as being the highest order priority in your life, especially if you haven't got any real world success or you come from a disadvantaged background where you're trying to prove a point. So then it's like, okay, if I had to choose between successful and being truthful, I'd prefer to be successful. You know, I can sort of skirt around the truth to ultimately get me successful. But then, you know, as you get older, your priorities change, your value will actually change, your core value will actually change. And, you know, you get to a point, at least for me, where I value transparency, and that's why I bring it up, because I feel like transparency is like a core tenet of my being now, where in the sense that if I can't live my life transparently and say, you know, this is how I ended up getting to this point in my life, then life isn't worth living. Like if I have to do something that I'm not 100% completely happy about, like now for me in life, it's sort of like, if it's not a resounding yes, then it's a no, right? Why am I doing things that's like a half yes? Yeah. You know, it should tick all the boxes. It should be a resounding yes. You should feel it in your entire being that this is what you want to do at this particular time. I know there's, you know, real world implications of that, where it's like, you know, sometimes, you know, you got to do something to survive, right? Where it's, you know, you got to bring an income in and all those sorts of things. But when you think about, you know, that core value, it's like, it should influence the way that you approach life, you know? And so transparency is actually, you know, the core value that I resonate with most at the moment at this stage of my life. Yeah. Where it's like, you know, and to the point where, you know, there's no value that is the be all and end all. They all have downsides as well. You know, being transparent doesn't necessarily mean that you retain the most friends. There are some friends that don't want to hear the truth, right? Or hear your take on the truth, I should say. You know, they're not comfortable with being spoken to in a very blunt manner, to have somebody say, look, you know, this is what I think. You know, if you ask me for my opinion, I'll tell you my opinion. If you don't ask me, I won't tell you. Yeah. Right? So it's very interesting to see, you know, as you go through life, you know, what are these things that sort of resonate for you, and then how that actually permeates the rest of the things that you do. You know, so for you, you know, when it comes to the teaching, you're always very quick to credit, you know, the people that you've drawn these inspirations from and there's influences from. And I think that's a positive thing, right? Because at the end of the day, I feel there's also a scholarly element to it. When I say a scholarly element, it's like knowing the history, right? It's like knowing the history of martial arts. And, you know, from that perspective, it's like, okay, this technique, what is the etymology of the name? Where did it come from? You know, it might be something like ashigarami or whatever, or senkaku or whatever. You know, the Japanese terms that Danaher is very big on. Yeah. But it could be something like a cradle, you know, a wrestling term. Yeah. Or a wrestler's guillotine or a twister, you know, depending on which background you've gotten it from. And it's interesting because I always like to think about how when we talk about all these different martial arts styles, what defines a style, right? And reality is that if it's a competitive, like a competitive combat sport where there's actually a pressure testing element where you're fighting against another person, well, the thing that determines the style is the rule set. Yeah. Right? So a boxer fights the way that a boxer does because you can't get kneed in the head. Yeah. Right? You can put your head down low and slip and evade punches and weave like that. Yeah. But, you know, you add legs into the equation and it becomes kickboxing. Well, that changes the game again. Yeah. Right? Having the kicks come into it. So, you know, you start to see a bit less head movement. Then you go to something like Muay Thai, where, you know, a lot of Muay Thai guys don't use much head movement at all because, you know, they want to keep upright and just be strong defensively to counter.
Yep.
Right. So then you go from Muay Thai to, say, left way, the introduction of a headbutt.
Yeah, changes
right?
it completely.
Changes it completely. And then you go to mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
Adding the ground elements changes it completely. It's like same thing, even just gi and no gi, right?
Yeah.
Right. Two totally different games have formed in those spheres just because of what are the weapons that are available to you.
Yeah.
What can you do stylistically?
Yeah. What's the rule set you're going to compete under?
Yeah. So, you know, I always reflect on that when I think about martial arts because, you know, even like, so I did the Kung Fu style that I did is a Shaolin martial art, right? Even if you think back to what the history of the Shaolin temple was, they would have monks that would obviously, you know, live a Buddhist lifestyle. And part of the reason why they would do martial arts is the whole sort of like synergy between your mental state and your physical body, that you need to have a strong body to have a strong mind, right? And then also, you know, there's lessons through suffering that teach you how to be at peace,
Yeah.
you know? So the goal in life isn't actually to find happiness. The goal in life is to be at peace.
Yeah. Be content.
Be content, you know, because happiness is a fluctuative state, you know? To find happiness, you need to find sadness,
Yeah.
right? You need to experience sadness. So then you can appreciate what happiness is. You can't have one without the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas being at peace is finding that happy common ground between the two. You're not overly excited. You're not, you know, down in the dumps and depressed. But one of the things about the Shaolin Temple was that they would send people out to go and, you know, learn martial arts and experience martial arts and try other martial arts and exchange martial arts ideas and then bring them back to the temple to then formulate, okay, what is our curriculum, right? And I feel like that's sort of happening, but on steroids now, you know, with the whole internet age, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, where people are able to, the ones that are really engaged in it, we can go and research other people's videos or look at things or buy instructionals and all this sort of stuff, or even just watching the fights, you know, and applying this element of conscious competence to it. You know, I was just, you know, doing some work with Tully before, and we're just talking about something so simple about, you know, because his knuckles busted up at the moment. He could only use his jab or his lead hand. And so I was like, okay, let's just do a couple of rounds where it's just jab and low kicks. And it was, and I was like, oh, look, I can see you doing this unconsciously, but do you ever think about, you know, where you place your jab? And he goes, oh, not really. And I'm like, well, you should, because, you know, if you want to set up the low kick, if I, you know, throw it to one side of your head, well, you're going to put your weight on the other side to obviously slip the punch. And that's going to set up, you know, my leg kick as a result of it. And then, you know, we did another round. And then after he goes, you know, I actually do that when I'm in the corner. I'm like, yeah, I know you do it, but, you know, do you think about it?
Yeah.
Like I think a lot of people in fighting now, like they get to this point where they're unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
They do these things because they work, but they don't really put the thought into why is it working?
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things that I find is really intriguing. And so, you know, when it came to you with the martial arts channel, like, you know, you also mentioned that you only like to do things that interest you.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, what was your mindset in terms of why you wanted to put some of these things together?
Sometimes it's just, again, like I said, personal interest, like 700 views because I did Gary Turn and Tan Lee, which like, most people don't, most MMA fans wouldn't even know happened, you know, but for anyone who's a hardcore, like it's such an awesome fight, you know, like, so whatever, 700 views on that, like I'm happy because I got to talk about it and bring light to that. Whereas something with like the calf kick video, even like the audio is like absolute rubbish and like it's so fast and like 50% of the comments are like, I hate your voice. And it's like, cool, thank you. But thank you for the input, sir. But obviously the content that was there and the information that was there was good enough to get views.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's kind of like just seeing something that I feel like I see, and not that other people weren't seeing it, but they just weren't explaining it in a way that people were waiting for.
Yeah.
And like I've had people message me and say like, oh, hey, I watched your video and we did this. Like I remember Fab, like someone sent me a video of Fab, Rob Whittaker's old coach, talking about it. Like, oh yeah, we took some of this stuff from this video. Mike Swick was talking to Henry Cejudo, and someone sent me a clip of that where he's like, I watched this guy's video, Stanley MMA, made this great video. And him and Cejudo were talking about it, and it's like mind-blowing for me, you know? Like Mike Swick's a guy that I watched come up when I was getting into MMA, so it was like just mind-blowing to have this guy talk about me. Yeah. And it's like I'm not doing anything. I'm just taking clips and just being like, oh, look at this.
Mm.
It's like it's the people that are in these clips that deserve the credit, not me.
Mm.
I'm just trying to explain it in a way that I could.
Mm.
And right time, right place. Yeah, it just, even now, I think if you search like calf kick, it's probably one of the top things to come up.
Yep.
And UFC probably made like $2.70 off that because they just took all the monetization. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I hope that helped them a lot. My $7.60 that I've earned in my YouTube career that goes to them. I hope that's really helping them out. And it's kind of like there's a book that Liam, my coach, gave me, which is called like I think it's like Julia Cameron, the ex-wife of James Cameron, Titanic director, Avatar director. And I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm doing a bad job of plugging this book, but it's basically about refining creativity and things like that. And I'm not a religious person, but in there it speaks about something that artists talk about a lot, which is the hand of God.
The muse.
And it was like, as silly as this might sound to other people, like I don't feel like I came up with this idea. It was almost like placed in my head. Like it just felt like there was something there. And I just started typing and collating clips, and there was something there. And all the videos that I've made that have done well were like that. Like it was already there. I didn't put it there. It was already there in my head. I just had to dig it out.
Yep.
And when I was trying to just be consistent and make a video every week, that's when it sucked. Because I had no passion for it. I had no creativity for it. I was just like, oh, better do something to try to stay on the algorithm.
Yep.
And that's when I was like, I won't do it. Like, I don't care. Like I said, you don't make anything from YouTube. It's almost impossible these days. So I'm only going to make stuff that I'm interested in that is already there, if that makes sense. The hand of God put it there.
Yeah. Look, that really resonates for me. I feel it much the same way. You know, when I do my studies, it's like I have to see something. You know, I could watch 50 fights, 100 fights, but not see something that just resonates in that moment, where it's like, you know, like there'll be certain videos where it's like, oh, I see something that I want to talk about. Yeah. And then it's like, okay, because I see something, I'm going to now spend the time to put it all together. And I actually enjoy doing that. So, you know, like I'm working on one now, and like the inspiration actually came from listening to a podcast of this guy. So the next one's going to be on Corey Sandhagen.
Nice.
But like, you know, he said some things on the JRE, Joe Rogan Experience, that resonate with exactly how I think about striking and fighting. Yeah. You know, he was talking about that most people think about fighting in terms of moves and combinations, whereas he thinks about it in terms of distance, position, and angle. And, you know, they're things that I talk about in a lot of my videos, distance, position, and angle. And I try and break it down into this very specific way of trying to look at things, because, you know, when you think about it like that, then you can replace, the moves become interchangeable. You know, if it's an attack from the rear side, well, it could be a rear cross, it could be a rear hook, it could be a rear body shot, it could be a right kick or a right low. You can replace with whatever move you like. But it's like, you know, when you think about it like that, it just sort of simplifies the game a lot more, rather than thinking about, okay, it's jab, cross, hook, or hook, cross, up, or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, I just think there's a lot of merit in trying to apply these different lenses. Yeah. And I think, you know, that's one of the things that I think is really great, that I hope, you know, the hand of God obviously keeps coming to you, and you find inspiration to do other videos as well, because at the end of the day, these takes are your takes, right? Just like in my videos, the take's my take. But if that concept can then help somebody else apply that in their own training, well, that's a win.
Yeah, absolutely, that's it. And that's where I had to, I guess, pull my head in a bit with like, oh, I got a lot of views because of the algorithm and just the timing and the name. Like, that's cool. And then, like I said before, it's a little bit disappointing to go from like a couple 100,000 to just like 1,000. Yeah. But then when I think about it, I was like, 1,000 people, still a lot of people, man. Like 1,000 people paying attention to what you say and thanking you for it and commenting on it. Even if it's 10 people, now I just appreciate that. Like, you know, I teach classes every day, and most of them have anywhere from 20 to 40 people. Yeah. So it was like, wait, if I think of this as like a class I'm teaching and 1,000 people watched it, like that's still pretty good. Yeah. You know, like if 1,000 people, 10 of those people take something away and do something with it, like then great. Like I've achieved my goal. Yeah. And I learned so much watching guys like Jack Slack and Sonny Brown, Lawrence Kenshin, and they had such an impact on the way that I changed my mind about the sport, you know? So I was like, well, if I can, through my coaching physically in location or through podcasting, through videos, inspire somebody else to make something that inspires somebody else, then like fantastic. The chain just keeps going,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I think that leads to the development of the sport.
Yeah.
You know, I always talk about this. You can't give a high level counter if the person doesn't even get past layer 1.
Yeah.
You know, if my initial setup, you don't counter it, then I can't apply my next layer to go over the top of that.
Yeah.
So then, you know, yeah, it's great if it's always effective, but you know, when it becomes like a rally is because, you know, we're both going at it. You're trying to counter my counter and I'm trying to counter your counter.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's the way the beauty of the sport is. And I appreciate, you know, the game of percentages a lot more, you know, where I want to focus on things that are high percentage rather than just, you know, the one punch thing. You know, yeah, of course there's great setups that lead to the one punch thing, but when it comes to probabilities, you know, would you rather play roulette every single time, or would you actually, you know, rather play a game where you can actually stack the odds in your favor?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You know, anybody can play roulette, but not everybody can always stack the chips in their favor. Doesn't mean you win every time, but as much as you can stack it in your favor, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Corey, he spoke about in there, it's like, it's also personal for your body type, your style, your personality, you know, like, sure, if you've got that one punch power, let's build a game around it, setting it up. But if you don't, let's admit it, you know, like I never had one punch stopping power.
Yeah.
So like I didn't bother being like, I'll just keep trying to have it. Like, it's just not going to come.
Yeah.
Like I can get better at setting it up. I can get better at pivoting my foot. I can get more power. But we all know there's just those guys that come in and they just have it.
Yeah.
Whatever reason, they just have it.
Yeah.
And sure, let's build a game around your best skill set.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the thing that I think is we're getting to now. It's like styles make fights.
Yeah.
You can't be building a style for yourself. You got to build a style for the game and what's happening now.
Yeah.
You can disagree with what's happening, but if it's happening, you better prepare for it.
Yeah.
And Corey spoke about switching stance and stuff, and there's big debates always about switching stance.
Yeah.
I can remember all my coaches early on whacking me in the head, like, what are you doing in southpaw? You suck at orthodox. Get back in orthodox.
Yeah.
And I just stayed in orthodox my whole career. And I think if you're an elite level guy, like a boxer who's great at one thing, that's probably better. But the world of MMA, everyone is switching stance.
Yep.
So regardless of what you personally think, you better know what they're going to target when they switch.
Yeah.
You don't have to switch if you don't want to. You're cutting yourself off a little bit.
Yeah.
Sure, you won't be able to come as proficient at both styles, but it's going to matter about your specific game, right? Like a guy like Khabib, he doesn't need to worry too much about stance switching and throwing liver kicks, for whatever.
Yeah.
But he needs to be aware that his opponents will.
Yeah.
And not just have a coach who's like, it's dumb. You know, so all that kind of stuff pushed me to MMA when people would say that's wrong. Like that's what I used to hate the most. Someone would say that's wrong. Like a karate guy going to Muay Thai and you can head kick people and then your coach is like, that's wrong.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm sorry, what's wrong about it?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the way you throw a kick.
Yeah.
Did my foot hit his head? Well, yeah, but it was wrong. Like,
Yeah.
well, bro, it's not fucking wrong. Like maybe it's wrong if we're talking about pure art form. You know, I want to be as good as I can at this one art form. But hey, if you can run off the side of the cage and kick someone in the head, like Anthony Showtime Pettis, then there's nothing wrong with it. Like if it works, it works.
Yeah, it's what's like how people would say, oh, you know, in open stances, so orthodox versus southpaw, oh, circle away from his power, circle away from his power. Like it just instills in people that, oh, you can only move this one way against a southpaw fighter. It's incorrect. You know, everything has a time and a place.
Yeah.
And, you know, the person that knows the layer of how to play the inside position, you know, they will take advantage of the person that wants to take the outside foot position.
Yeah.
Right. So these are the things I love talking about, that sort of stuff. But we've actually got to get across to a class.
Yes, sir.
So if people want to find you, how do they find you?
They can find me on Instagram. It's just Zach Stanley. It's all one word. Zach, Stanlee.
Yep.
And on YouTube, it's the same. It's just Stanley MMA. Same thing, Lee.
Yep. All right. Sweet. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Johnny.
Cool.